Welcome back to Talking Sports with Brandon. This is NFL Week 8 recap. And it's a Week 8 recap, but it's also a trade deadline recap as well, because the trade deadline was November 1st. I'm recording this on Wednesday, November 2nd. So there's no more trades from this point on. You can still sign guys who have been cut or just, claim them off waivers. There's going to be some people who will be cut who couldn't be traded at the deadline. So we'll see about that. But for the most part, the guys who are impactful and will make bigger decisions on your team have been moved or haven't been moved. And there was definitely some guys who we thought might have got moved or definitely had a lot of rumors about them going into the deadline who is still on their team. So I'll get into that after, but first we'll start off with the 5 picks like we always do. I keep saying it. I mean, I need a good week, and it's just not happening. I went 1-3-1 this past week. Just can't. I just can't get over the 500. I mean, I think I've gone like 4 or 5 straight weeks without even going 3-2. So it's been a struggle. The overall record is now 16-22-2. So it's just hard times right now. It really is. We'll go over them. I think I mean, there was 2 that really could have went my way. I thought should have went my way, but we'll talk about it. But the first game, Cardinals Vikings. I said I liked the Cardinals in this one. And you know what? For the most part, I mean, they definitely played a good game against the Vikings. I mean, the reasons I brought up in the last video of why I thought this game could have been close was the Vikings played down to their competition. And for a majority of this game, I mean, it was definitely a close game throughout. It wasn't like the Vikings ran away and the Cardinals had to come back. I mean, the biggest deficit was 28-17, and that was about halfway through the third quarter. And the Cardinals answered right back with a touchdown to make it 28-23. So they tried to go for the 2-point. They didn't get it. They lost 34-26, so it wouldn't have mattered in terms of the spread being plus 3.5. But who knows? That could have made a difference. If it's 28-23, then who knows how different that game could have been. But yeah, I guess maybe that didn't matter as much. But it was a close game throughout. I mean, Kyler Murray threw 2 picks, which didn't help, but he did throw 3 touchdowns. The Cardinals looked the best offensively they've looked in a while. I mean, I know they scored 40 points last week against the Saints, but the defense had 2 pick sixes. The defense played a huge factor into why they scored 40 points. And for this game, I mean, they were moving the ball. They didn't really run the ball that much. Again, they don't really have great running backs anyways. It was more so through the air. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins had 12 catches for 160 and a touchdown. So he's only been back for 2 games, but he's kind of already reestablished himself as the best receiver in the league, or at least top 5. I mean, he's had 2 monster games in his first games back from that suspension. So, again, this one didn't hit for me, but I thought it was good to take a chance on this. And the Vikings didn't play amazing. They just didn't really turn the ball over. I mean, Cook had 111 on the ground. Kirk Cousins was 24-36 for 240 and 2 touchdowns. So they just did what they had to do. They just didn't make mistakes. And against an inferior opponent, as long as you're not the one making mistakes, you'll usually come up on the right side of the score. And that's exactly what happened. So that was 0 for 1 right there. Again, not a bad chance to take. It just didn't work out. Second one, though, at this one, I mean, it had no chance. Raiders, Saints, I had Raiders minus 1.5. I mean, I did not even come close. The Raiders didn't come close, and that's probably the bigger story in this, is that the Raiders, what is going on with the Raiders? They lost 24-0, and they didn't even cross midfield until, I think it was halfway through the fourth quarter. They didn't even get past midfield until halfway through the fourth quarter, which is crazy when you think about it. I mean, you couldn't get... You're starting, I mean, the Saints scored a couple touchdowns. That means you're starting at the 25, the 20 to 25, somewhere around there. You couldn't get 25 yards to even get past midfield in any of those drives. I mean, like I said, it had no chance from the beginning. It was still kind of close for the most part, but it was after one, it was only 7-0, and that was at the end of the first quarter. The Saints got a touchdown. Then they got a field goal to make it 10-3, then halfway through the second quarter, or 10-0, then halfway through the second quarter, it's still 10-0. Saints do score another touchdown, and then it's 17-0 for basically for the rest of the quarter, and then the beginning of the third quarter, it's 24-0, and then that was the rest. That was the rest of the scoring for the day. So I yeah I really don't know what to say about this one. I thought this was a good matchup for the Raiders. They found their confidence against the Texans. You're still going into a tough environment, but it's still a team that just got embarrassed last Thursday night against the Cardinals, and the game where two pick sixes and making all these mistakes. They're getting ran out of the building, to be honest. And I just something similar would happen. I mean, they still don't have Michael Thomas, no Jarvis Landry. They're still missing a lot of guys on that team. And it just seemed like the Raiders they needed to find their groove, and if they were going to do what they thought they were going to do at the beginning of the season, which was make the playoffs and at least make some noise in the AFC, then this is where the win streak needed to happen. With them being 2-4, you could win this game, go to 3-4, make a huge difference in your schedule and where you are in the standings. If you get those two big wins right there. And then I went over their schedule in the last episode, but you go Jaguars, Colts, Broncos. Those are very winnable games if you were to win the Saints game. And then what do you know? You have a 4-game winning streak. You're 5-4. Things are looking a lot better. But at this point, it's hard to even say they'll make any adjustments, any improvement on their season. It just seems like a broken team. The running game, I mean, in this one, it's hard to run the ball when you're losing the entire game. So it wasn't as dominant as it had been the last 3 games with Jacobs, but Carr looks lost. Davante Adams had 1 catch for 3 yards. The offensive line's not playing well against the pass. The defense still, they don't have playmakers on that defense. The secondary is a nothing for them. It's basically just Max Crosby. I'll say it again, but Chandler Jones has done actually nothing so far this season, just like I said he would. But they're just a broken team right now. So I may have to I probably will stay off the Raiders for the time being. I guess we'll see, but it's how can you trust a team that can't even get past midfield halfway through the fourth quarter? So this one had no chance, not even a shot. So that's 0-2. That's 0-2 right there. Now this next one, this is where the tie came. It was Dolphins at Lions. -4 was the line for the Dolphins, and I still can't believe it didn't hit. But the fact they won 31-27. It was so close to getting it, and you know what? They had to come back in this game. To be fair, it was 27-17 going to the fourth quarter. The Lions were winning 27-17. So they had to come back, and they actually got the game-winning touchdown with 12 seconds left. So it's not like they were up 31-27 and it's 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but still, the Dolphins, the fact that, they were losing this game 21-7, it was 14-0 at one point, it was 21-7, like I said, 27-17, so they were losing this entire game. And they had to fight their way back, they had to come all the way back, and you got to give credit to the Dolphins. I think they're a good team, and if Tua didn't get injured for those 3 games, are they winning all 3 of those games? I'm not sure about that, but is there a good chance to go 2-1? I would say probably yeah. So the record right now is 5-3, but you could argue it could be 7-1 or even 6-2. I would say at the minimum, because with Tua in those games, you're probably winning at least 1, most likely 2 of those games. And you know what? So far this season, he's undefeated as a quarterback. And going back to last season, I believe he won his last 8 or 9 starts to end that season. So they won that big winning streak. So he hasn't lost an NFL game in like almost a full season. If if it was 8 or 9 games last season, and then it's been 5 games so far this season. So almost a full season, he hasn't lost a game, if you look at it like that, which is kind of crazy. So I'm not the biggest Tua guy, but I have to give credit where it's due. And so far this season, which I think Mike McDaniel has helped out a ton. I think Tyreek Hill has helped out a ton. So for sure, that's what you're supposed to do. A third-year quarterback who's had struggles, had doubts about him, lost a lot of confidence. You bring in a new head coach who can bring in a system that fits around Tua, and you bring in a top 5 wide receiver in the league, who is, of course, going to help, especially when you have a guy like Waddle, who you drafted in the first round last year. He had a really good season last year, and he's only going to get better so far this season, which has been the case. So they made the necessary moves and the right moves to make that team better, and it's worked out. And a lot of teams try to do that. You look at year 3 as being the year where their first round quarterback, their franchise quarterback, it makes that leap. Josh Allen made his in year 3. Tua is making his in year 3. So that's just the way that teams look at it. They want to get the weapons around their guy for that year 3. Because some guys like a Mahomes, I know he's sad his first year, but a Mahomes, a Herbert, some guys can come in the league right away and just be, really good and be great. But some guys, it takes time. I mean, it goes from college, they have injuries, they were in a different system, they're trying to fit into this system, the weapons around them aren't as good, they don't have a good offensive line. It just takes time. And for the Dolphins, it's taken time, but I think it's worth it. You're 5-3. Again, you could be better, but you're still 5-3. They have an amazing shot at the playoffs, and when they're in the playoffs, they're an explosive team. And later in this episode, we'll talk about some of the moves that they made that made their team better. They got much better at the trade deadline. So for a team that was already pretty good, and probably a lot of people had them probably winning a playoff game, or depending on who they played, but at least winning a playoff game and maybe getting a second playoff win, their team got a lot better. So they're definitely a team to watch out for. I've been looking at them so far this season. I've always liked them in matchups. If you remember that Dolphins-Ravens matchup from earlier this season, I said that was a big test for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson at the time. And that was week 2, I think that was. So the fact that, in week 2 I was saying that, and it was a big matchup. I mean, the Dolphins came all the way back and won that game, but, that was a matchup where it seemed, we probably, of course the Ravens are going to win that game. The Ravens are home in that one too. They're better than the Dolphins, but I mean, the Dolphins they're on that level of the Ravens. I think the Ravens are maybe a little bit better when they're both at their best, but at the same time, the way that the Dolphins play and the way that they have the ability to come back and can just kill you offensively with speed, it's you don't want to face them in the playoff. I'll say that. You do not want to face them in the playoffs when it comes to that time. But yeah, this one, they won by 4. The line was 4. So this was the push. So we're 0-2-1. Fourth game, Giants-Seahawks. I had the Seahawks -3. This one I felt confident about. Seahawks won 27-13. It just, at some point, the Giants' luck of these one-possession games, these fourth quarter comebacks, keeping these teams under 20, 25 points and keeping their offense, which isn't good, still in it to have a chance to come back. It was going to expire at some point, and that's what happened. The Seahawks, that's not even the best team that they've played over these last couple weeks, and it was just a matter of time. It was just who was going to be the team where their luck ran out, and it was the Seahawks. So this one, I mean, I guess it was close. It was 13-13 in the fourth quarter, but you just needed the Seahawks to, they had a fumble. Now, to be fair, the Giants had 2 fumbles on punt returns, which obviously gave the Seahawks great field position, but as long the Seahawks just needed to not fall into that same trap that these other teams were falling in, which was, keeping the Giants in the game and not putting them away and not putting together long drives. And the Seahawks finally did that. They went up 23-13 or 20-13, and then finally the nail in the coffin was with 5 minutes left. They got a touchdown from Kenneth Walker to make it 27-13. So this was the first win. Seahawks 5-3. I mean, Giants are 6-2 now. I think that they'll probably come down to earth a little bit more. I mean, they already have 6 wins, and it's just turned November, so you'd probably, in a weak NFC, you'd probably like to think they make the playoffs still, but I'm not sure. I've never been high on them. I just don't like their team. Now they have 2 easy matchups coming up. They have Texans and Lions, and those are both at home. If they win both those games, they're 8-2 going into Thanksgiving against Dallas. But I don't know. I don't think this team's that good of a team, and I think their schedule's been very favorable so far. I mean, again, they have Texans and Lions coming up. Those are 2 one-win teams. Even after Cowboys, they play Washington, which has showed some life with Heineke. Which I said with Heineke they play better, and they played better with Heineke. So we'll see about that one as well. But then Eagles, then Washington again, then Minnesota, then Indianapolis, and Philadelphia again. So it gets a little bit tougher as the schedule goes on, and we'll see what they look like. But with 6 wins before November, it's hard not to at least get to 10 wins, right? I mean, if you win these next 2 games, then you got to win, 2 out of your next 7 games. That seems pretty easy, even though the competition does get a little bit harder. There's still you should probably split the Washington series, and then the Colts game should probably be a win. So we'll see. But that was the first win of the week, and then My last pick, Packers at Bills. I had Bills minus 10.5, and they won 27-17. I mean, this was the one, they were, I mean, this game was over. It was 24-7. It was 14-0. This game was over. The Packers had no life. The only thing that the Packers could do in this game was run the ball. Aaron Jones had a monster game. I think he had 146, 143 on the ground. So other than that, they couldn't move the ball. Rodgers did get, a 37-yard touchdown to make it 27-17. They had a couple plays where they did something, but for the majority of that game, they couldn't run the ball, or when they weren't running the ball, they weren't moving it. And the Bills, Josh Allen threw 2 picks, which was costly. One was in the red zone, so that's a guaranteed 3 points right there at that minimum. And it wasn't even the red zone; it was like inside the 10-yard line. So, I mean, if he doesn't throw a pick there, let's say they just, it's 4th down, whatever, they don't score a touchdown, it's a field goal right there, and then it's 30-17, and then they cover. But yeah, they should have covered. I mean, they were dominating this game. It was so obvious. I mean, the Bills at home against the Packers, who have been terrible. It was such obviously going to be a blowout. Even though the final score doesn't indicate a blowout, if you watch the game, you knew it was a blowout. The Packers had no chance of winning it, even coming close. So it sucks that they didn't cover because they really should have. And it hurts for me because that was my 3rd loss. I went 1-3-1, as I said, and I feel like I should have went at least 500, at least 2-2, and then the one tie. I mean, that, again, there was 12 seconds left, so it's hard to really say, and they were down the entire game, but this one should have been a win. I mean, come on. The Bills against the Packers should have been a win, but Packers 3-5. They play the Lions this week. I mean, you like to say they win that game. They're minus 3.5 on the road, but who knows? I mean, how can you really trust them to even win that game? I think they should, and I think they will, but I mean, how can you trust them to win? I mean, the Lions, they've been close in a lot of games as well, so maybe it's their turn to win games. I don't know, but that's going to be an interesting matchup. If they lose that game, I mean, then where's their win on their schedule? They play the Cowboys the next week coming off a bye. Then they play the Titans, who have showed a lot of life recently, and then they play the Eagles. So if they lose this Lions game, they'd be 3-6, and they'll most likely be 3-9 at the end of that little 3-game schedule right there. So I mean, if they win, even if they win this Lions game, they're 4-5. They most likely lose those 3 games. That puts them at 4-8. That's just. It's a colossal failure for them. A lot of people are high on them. I wasn't super high on them because the lack of, no Devontae Adams, no MVS. The defense didn't really make huge improvements. I thought it was good last year, but it hasn't been playing so that great so far this year. The offensive line's beat up as well. So, yeah, that's a lot of problems there. We'll see what happens in the offseason for them because I don't see them making the playoffs. I don't see them doing anything. They're already so far behind in the division. There's a chance to make it for the wild card, but at the same time, the Seahawks are 5-3, the Giants are 6-2, even Washington's 4-4. They already beat Green Bay, so there's other teams that could definitely make some noise as well. So I don't know where the Packers go from here, but those are my 5 games. Like I said, 1-3-1. I guess some other games talk about, Niners, Rams. Niners, they destroyed the Rams, 31-14. I said this was make it or break it week for the Rams, and I think they're broken. Even though they're only 3-4, and the Niners are 4-4, Niners already beat them twice. The Rams Cooper Kupp got injured in this game. They said he's going to be fine, but it definitely seems like a lingering, nagging injury for the future. So at some point, don't be surprised if he has a surgery or it's a worse injury than they're really letting on. Or if he just re-aggravates it, but they're broken. They cannot move the ball offensively. The only way they can do it is through Kupp. That's the only way they can move the ball. They have no running game. The defense is not playing well at all for the guys they have on it. The Niners, they controlled this game for the whole way. I mean, the Rams went up 7-0 early, and they were even up 14-7, but from that point, they outscored them 24-0. So it wasn't close. McCaffrey, huge game, monster game. He had a passing touchdown, he had a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. I think they said it was the first time since LaDainian Tomlinson in 2005. So he's obviously, showing the fruits of that trade, which was, yeah, you're getting a top 5 running back in the league. And when he's healthy in a system like this, he's probably top 2. And you can make the argument he's number 1. So the Niners seem to be in a really good spot right now. The Rams wanted McCaffrey. They kind of stole McCaffrey from them, I guess you could say, and it's clearly working out. And yeah, the Niners seem to be on their way to finally winning that division. I know the Seahawks are 5-3, but the Niners did beat them earlier in the season, and they are the better team. When they face each other, let's see when they next face each other. It's pretty late in the season. It's in what, like a little bit more than a month. So at that point, we'll see what their records look like. I would assume that the Niners record is better, or at least I would say at least a game or two better, but I would assume better. And they'll probably win that game. So, yeah, big props to the Niners for how they're looking and playing. And other than that, I guess I'll mention the Falcons-Panthers game. That was a back and forth game. Panthers hit a Hail Mary to tie the game at the end of regulation. They missed the extra point because DJ Moore took his helmet off on the field, but it really wasn't on the field, but they called it anyways. So that made it's usually an extra point's like 33 yards. It pushed it back to 48 yards. They missed. In overtime, they still had a chance to hit a field goal to win it. He missed again, and then the Falcons hit a game-winning field goal in overtime. So Falcons are leading the NFC South. Crazy. They're 4-4. And yeah, do I expect them to win it? No, but at the same time, what do I expect of the Bucs? They lost on Thursday night against the Ravens. They're 3-5. They look pretty shot and just they're like the Packers, but they still have a chance in their division because it's so bad. But the Falcons win that division. That would be whoever gets to play them in the first round would be the luckiest team because they're not a good team. But we'll see. There's so much left in this season. We're kind of at the halfway point right now, so we'll see if they win that division. But yeah, those are the games from this week. Now, I want to talk about the trade deadline, like I was saying earlier. So the big trades that happened, I'll kind of just go through. So the Bills, they added to their team. They got Nyheim Hines, who's a good receiving back for them. They have Devin Singletary, they have James Cook, and now they have Nyheim Hines. They traded Zach Moss in this one, so they're kind of replacing him. He lost carries, he lost touches, he wasn't playing that much anyways. So this is a good running back. He's a veteran guy. He can be solid for you. Again, he can kind of catch the ball in the backfield, which most of the time, Allen's kind of their RB1 anyway. So, you kind of want a receiving back out of their backfield because he can just dump it off to them and they can make plays. So that was a good trade, I thought, for them. They didn't do much, but that was the one big thing that they did do. The Broncos, well, I guess I'll say the Dolphins. The Dolphins made big trades. And the first one was, I guess the lesser of the two, but still a pretty big trade, I would say, was trading for Jeff Wilson, who was the running back for the Niners. It makes sense. McDaniel obviously comes from the Niners. Get Wilson in his system, which is very similar to Shanahan's anyways. So they also traded Chase Edmonds to the Broncos in the second trade that I'll talk about right after this. But so he replaces him. So they have him and Raheem Mostert, who were obviously both 49ers. So yeah, they're kind of building, McDaniels is getting the guys that he likes and knows that fit his system. And I think that's a really good 1-2 punch right there. They're not a team that runs the ball a lot, but if they have to, they have two guys who have put up monster games in the past. Mostert ran for 200 yards in the playoffs a couple years ago against the Packers, I think it was, or the Vikings, whoever it was. So he's put up big performances. They know how to play. They've been in the playoffs before, so I think that was a good trade for them. They only gave up a 5th-round pick for him. I think that's just a really solid trade. But then the bigger of the two trades was they landed Bradley Chubb from the Broncos. This is where they traded Chase Edmonds. They traded a 1st-round pick, and they traded a 4th-round pick. They also got a 5th-round pick in return. But Bradley Chubb, when he came in as a rookie, he was a monster. He's dealt with some injuries, some inconsistencies over the last couple of years. This year, he's definitely been better. I think he has 5.5 sacks through 8 games, 7 or 8 games. So he's looked better. And with him now in the Dolphins, they have Jalen Phillips, who they drafted, I think, like 2 years ago on the other side. So that defense is a turnover defense. They play fast, they play aggressive. I think getting Chubb helps a lot. I think it's going to help their defensive line getting after the quarterback more. So as long as he can play the way that he's shown so far and the way that we've seen him play in the past, I think that's a really good trade. And, they're going to have to work to sign him as well. I think in the tweets that I was seeing, they're already working towards that. They want to keep him. You don't give up a first round pick like that to not keep him. So it looks like he's going to be a Dolphin for a while. But, if he could, that potential that he's shown and has, if he could play to that level or very close to that level, that's a great trade. I mean, a first round pick, which I'm not even sure if it was their first round pick. I think it was the Niners' first round pick. So that's obviously going to be later in the first round. Even if it was their first round pick, it'd be later in the first round as well. So, would you rather pick a guy late in the first round? You don't know. He may take a year or two to develop. And then who even knows if he does develop? Or get a guy in Bradley Chubb, who's been in the league for a couple years, has put up some monster seasons. It's a no-brainer. So that was a great trade. I thought they vastly improved their roster, and they're going for it. I mean, like I was talking about, with Tua as the starter, they haven't lost. So why would you think that they, obviously at some point they're going to lose, but why would you think that you're not one of the top teams in the AFC with the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens? Like, why would you not think you're up there with them? So great trade, I thought. Another trade, which doesn't really impact this season, but impacts the future, and that's the Jaguars traded for Calvin Ridley. They traded a 5th and a 2nd round pick. Those are both conditional. It's in 2023, the 5th, and 2024, the 2nd. So again, this doesn't impact this year because he's suspended for the year for betting, but him, he came in, 2018, I think it was. He's put up a couple 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He's a proven player. And, that's the guy you need for Trevor Lawrence. Again, that's going to be year 3. That's what I'm talking about. Year 3 is the time for these quarterbacks. Lawrence was really bad his rookie year. You could blame it on a lot of factors. No weapons, no offensive line, and the coaching, whatever was going on there. This year he's looked better, but still mistakes, still not looking like the guy that everyone thought he was going to be. But now, with Calvin Ridley fully back for next year, now you have a wide receiver 1. He may not be an elite receiver, but he's a very good receiver when he's playing. And now with ETN emerging as the clear running back 1 for them, now you're putting the pieces together. You get some more help on the offensive line. Again, they don't have a great record so far this season, so you could pick an offensive lineman early or get another weapon if you want. So they have a lot of options to choose from. The defense is looking better. It's getting better. It's going to take time to develop for them, but your main focus is on that offense, and getting a guy like Calvin Ridley is a great move for the future because you're not going to be competitive this year. They've looked good at times, and their record's better than what it's been in the past, but I think they've lost like 4 or 5 games in a row, so it makes sense. I think it was a great trade. You're buying low on great value because the Falcons had no use for him. They wanted to trade him anyways last year, so I think it's a really good trade for the Jaguars. Another wide receiver trade, which impacts this year and can maybe play a factor into a year 3 quarterback going into next year, but the Bears traded for Chase Claypool from the Steelers. They gave up a 2nd round pick. Now, I don't know how much I love this trade because I don't really love Chase Claypool. Now, he has the build to be a really good wide receiver. He's like 6'4", 225 or 220, whatever he is. So he's a big body. He makes big catches. He's one of those guys, and he has some speed, but he hasn't really been that consistent with Pittsburgh. There's, the off the field stuff. It isn't bad stuff, but it's just kind of annoying stuff and stuff that you just don't really want. So maybe with him in Chicago being traded, maybe he kind of realizes what's going on and changes. But the build that he has and the potential, there is some greatness in there. But I think this was to help Justin Fields. That's what this trade was for. And I don't know if he was the right guy, and you also gave him a 2nd round pick for him. I don't know if he's worth a 2nd round pick. I saw a tweet that was talking about, and it's different situations, but it's just funny to see, they traded a 2nd round pick for Chase Claypool, and the Cardinals traded a 2nd round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. It's just, there were, he had a contract thing and whatever, but it's funny to see that top 5 and at the time the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL went for a 2nd round pick, and Chase Claypool is going for a 2nd round pick. So I don't know if I love it because I just don't know. I don't know how much I love the player, but I do at least commend the Bears for trying to get some help for him and giving him a wide receiver, giving him someone else to on, because they need playmakers on that team. They could run the ball. They ran the ball for 200 plus yards in 3 straight games, but they got to throw the ball and they need weapons. So I at least like that aspect of it, but I just don't know how much I love the player. But we'll see. We'll see how it works out for the rest of this year and then really for next year. Then there's 2 more big trades that happened. One was, I guess, a couple days ago, but it was official yesterday. It was the Ravens trading for Roquan Smith. Now, this is a big trade because, again, someone else from the Bears, but Roquan Smith, he came into this season holding in. He wanted a new contract, didn't get it. He decided to play this season. He hasn't been as good as he's been in past years, but he's still been pretty good. He's a 2-time second All-Pro, so obviously is a star in this league and has that superstar quality about him. I think he leads the league in tackles this season as well. But the Ravens trade for him. He fits the Ravens. He feels like a Raven, to be honest. One of those linebackers who's, he'll get after you. He'll just make all the plays on the field. So they gave up a 2nd-round pick and a 5th-round pick in 2023. Now, the big thing for them is that he's going to want a contract. So clearly you're making this trade knowing that you're going to sign him, I would assume, because he's still young. I think he's 26, I think he is. And he obviously is playing at a high level as well. So, I would assume that they'd want to sign him. That's the reason for this trade. But assuming that they do at the end of the season or at some point maybe throughout the season, I think it's a really good trade. Now, if you're a Ravens fan, you probably wanted some help offensively in terms of wide receivers, but their defense hasn't been amazing so far this season. They've been burnt a lot of times. I think he'll make a big impact as well on that side of the ball. Maybe secondary a little bit more, needed a little bit more help, but still, you get a playmaker like that in your team, I don't think you're going to complain with that. Then the last big trade, which happened yesterday. This was the first trade that happened on trade deadline day, but the Lions traded TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings. So they traded Hawkinson, a 4th-round pick in 2023, and a conditional 4th in 2024. And the Lions got a 2023 2nd-round pick and a 2024 3rd-round pick. They kind of been looking to trade Hawkinson. They drafted in the 1st round a couple years ago. He's been solid. He can definitely, give you some production offensively. If you give the ball to him, he'll make plays, but it was kind of just one of those things where his time in Detroit was kind of just done. It kind of ran its course a little bit. Still a solid player. Definitely a top, 7 tight end, I would say, in the NFL. So definitely good value for the Vikings. The reason they kind of made this trade was that, obviously they're 6-1. They're going for it. They think they have the team to at least make a run in the playoffs and add another offensive weapon. You already have Justin Jefferson. You have Adam Thielen. You have Dalvin Cook. Their tight end, Irv Smith, is out for basically the rest of the season. It's like 8 to 10 weeks, so it makes sense. You're also getting a good player in Hawkinson. It's not like he's just some tight end to fill in. He's going to be a major piece on that, on that offense, I think. So, and he's young. I don't know what his contract situation exactly is. I would assume they have to sign him at, rather this year or next year. So I would assume that they would, and they'd keep him in their fold for their team for the future. So I think it's a good trade. It's weird to see an in-division trade like that, but for the Vikings, I think that's a really good trade. They needed another weapon, at least someone that they could throw the ball to, and I think Hawkinson, for the value that they got him at, I think it was a good trade. So those are the big trades for the week, or for trade deadline day. Some guys who didn't get traded, Brandon Cooks, Kamara, there was talks of him being traded. I didn't really think that was likely, but it was possible. Kareem Hunt didn't get traded. So there was definitely guys who didn't, that you maybe thought were going to, but those are the guys who got traded. It was a good trade line day. I think there was 10 trades in total. There's a couple of small ones that weren't really worth mentioning, but those are the big ones. So that was the recap of Week 8, recap my 5 picks, and the recap of trade deadline day. So the video's coming up. You'll see this one, and then definitely check out my Cowboys video against the Bears. That will happen, and then check out the preview into Week 9, which, we'll make 5 more picks. Again, hopefully we go over 500, but we'll see. So definitely check out those videos, and thank you for watching.